Two things. First, Happy New Year. Second, UFC Vegas 84 predictions. Let's go. First fight card of the year, 12 fights on the slate, which means undoubtedly over the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to give you 12 winners. At the top of the card, we are running one back in the main event to settle the score between Magomed Ankalaev and Johnny Walker once and for all. We have to go back a couple of months. We got to go back to October when an illegal move more than halfway through the first round ended the fight. I thought Johnny Walker should have won. I don't know how a knee could be thrown unintentionally, but it happened. So we have to do it again to crown a clear-cut winner, but we can use those 3 minutes to get a better idea of how the rematch is going to go. So you watch the fight back. Few things stand out. First is what the fight looked like at range. Both guys were patient. Ankalaev a little bit more so than Walker. They both landed strikes, but really the clean strikes were the leg kicks from both sides. And going into the fight, we expected the bigger, more athletic, more powerful guy in Johnny Walker to land the heavier strikes, and that's what happened. While both guys were landing these kicks, his leg kicks were landing harder. They were taking a bigger effect, and with 5 rounds to work, if he could make that investment early, it could pay off later. Where Ankalaev looked best is when he was able to punish Johnny Walker's mistakes, and that's really the difference between these two guys. Johnny Walker has all the physical tools to be the best fighter in the division, even compete at heavyweight, but he lacks the mental side, and that's where Magomed Ankalaev is so great. That's what's made him so successful throughout his career. Fighting Magomed Ankalaev is like fighting AI, like fighting a robot. And I say that because he's going to do a lot of the right things. He's going to minimize errors, and he's fine wherever the fight goes, and he can keep it up for all 5 rounds. And I feel like a 5-round fight favors Magomed Ankalaev in this fight, not only because we know he has the cardio to do it, but that gives Johnny Walker 25 minutes to screw something up. All it takes is one crucial fight-altering mistake. We saw that in their first fight 90 seconds in. We saw him get hit to the body. Johnny Walker plays possum a little bit, then he throws a flying knee, and it's this close to landing, this close to probably ending the fight. But it doesn't end the fight for Johnny Walker there. It actually ends up with him being put in a bad position on the mat. That's how close Johnny Walker is to either winning the fight or losing the fight, just like that. Which leads me to believe that Magomed Ankalaev wins, but laying chalk on minus 450 isn't ideal. I think there's plenty of value on the underdog here. So if you are to bet on the main event, which you don't always have to do, you don't always need action at the very top. We can talk about that in some other video, maybe a live show later, or should live shows come back in 2024, let me know. But the bet would definitely be Johnny Walker inside the distance, just to bump up those juicy odds a little bit more. The pick, however, is going to be Magomed Ankalaev to win this fight by decision. Next, we have another rematch on the card in our co-main event. 2 of some of the best flyweights in the world. Manel Kape and Matheus Nicolau, they fight again here. Originally, they competed nearly 3 years ago, and if you just look at the record, you'll think, okay, Nicolau squeaked out a decision.
You are fake news.
A classic botched decision and robbery by the judges in that fight, because Manel Kape clearly won the second and third rounds. And what were the key differences in the second and third than in the first round? Well, in the first round, Matheus Nicolau was able to get these takedowns. He was able to control the pace of the fight, look for submissions. He looked like he was on his way to cruising to a decision win. But after round 1, Nicolau goes 0 for 6 on takedown, which means he has to strike with Manel Kape, and that's not going to work out for most people. If you go back and watch, and I know a lot of people agree, especially when they're watching live and on the rewatch, Manel Kape should have won the second and third round with his volume and just the optics of it all. So the judges get it wrong. It's not a surprise at all, but in the rematch, I do think that Manel Kape is going to win much cleaner. He's looked great since that fight with Nicolau. He put Ode Osborne on the highlight reel with a flying knee. He finished Olga Zumagulov, which is a tough guy. Not a lot of people are putting him out. 30-27 against David Dvorak, who I believe is ranked top 10 in the division right now, and showed all the well-roundedness you can ask for against Felipe Dos Santos last time out. Nicolau is coming off of a knockout loss to Brandon Royval, who just competed for the title. No shame in that. Brandon Royval has that in his locker. But to follow a bad knockout loss up with somebody as explosive and powerful and dynamic as Manel Kape, it's just bad biscuits. It's a recipe for disaster. So Manel Kape is a big favorite, and it's for good reason here. He's got more ways to win, a smaller chance of getting finished, and overall, he's just the more explosive guy in this fight. I do recognize, however, that Manel Kape does enjoy the fight time. Like, he's not one of these guys who's going balls to the wall, try to get you out of there, cash his check, and go home. I think after a couple minutes of him settling in and him getting out ahead, he's just cool. He wants to piece you up. He wants to have fun while he's doing it. He's relishing the moment. So I don't think that he finishes Nicolau here, because I don't know if he necessarily wants to. So give me Starboy. Give me Manel Kape to win this fight by decision. For this next fight, I love it. I love it from all angles. It's great matchmaking. These are old heads in this game, veterans of this game. 40 years old in MMA, especially in these lower weight classes, is ancient, next to extinct. Think of MMA years as kind of like dog years, right? 75 years of lived experience between these two. So this this is the AARP fight of the week, and it's good for the sport. Vets should be fighting vets, not being used as fodder to prop up some prospects that might not be all that good anyway. Now, the line for this one is shockingly narrow. I would have expected Jim Miller, especially with his recent run that he's been on, to be a much bigger favorite here. And since the line is very close, it's almost a pick 'em. We're hammering Jim Miller this week. He's just had a career resurgence over the last 2 years. He's 4-1 in his last 5. He's a finishing machine. His boxing has looked phenomenal, and his jiu-jitsu is snappy.
Snap him! And that's what we're gonna do.
And now, has he been running so hot as a result of soft matchmaking? Yes, of course. We're not gonna pretend like that's not true, but the way that he's putting these guys out is still very impressive. Now, on the other side, Mowgli Benítez has been in the UFC for nearly a decade, and he's fought some really strong competition along the way. Some guys like Andrei, Sadiq Youssef, Billy Q, David Onama. The problem is he's losing to all of them. Not only is he losing to these guys, but he's getting finished as well. He's been finished in 4 out of 6 UFC losses. He's only 7-6 in the promotion, and his wins have come over guys that aren't even in the UFC anymore, not just because they aged out, but most of the time because they're cut. The combined record of the last 3 people that Gabriel Benítez has beaten in the UFC comes out to 2-10, and that's over a 6-year span. We have to go all the way back 6 years to scrape together 3 wins for him. But you have to ask, if he's so bad, Kunith, why isn't he cut from the UFC? Because he's fun, he's game, he's down to brawl, he puts it all on the line, win or lose. He puts on exciting fights, and if you're tough enough and talented enough to keep these fights competitive, which Gabriel Benítez is, he's going to keep getting contracts from the UFC, because you want to see these guys scrap. It's not always about, oh, who's the highest level this, who's the highest level that. We watch Nate Landwehr and we love it. Nate Landwehr ain't never sniffing a UFC title, but I will watch Nate Landwehr. You could put Nate Landwehr in the co-main event spot until the cows come home. I'm paying for the card. So it's not always about who's the best or who can compete for the title. You have a couple of guys. You have very high level guys. You have guys that they don't know much about. You have legends like Jim Miller, and you have guys that are just going to go there and lay it all on the line like Gabriel Benítez. But what will this fight look like? Well, I think that Jim Miller probably knocks him out, because I do think that these guys are going to brawl. That's really the only way their fights have been looking lately. It could come in the first round. I could see it squeaking into the second round, but either way, I think that Jim Miller gets it done. I expect him to catch Gabriel Benítez if he extends these combinations the way that he has, and he's done it for so long that once he has a guy hurt, it's over. Jim Miller is a master at putting the finishing touches on these fights. He's very accurate with his follow-up strikes. You don't see Jim Miller letting a whole lot of guys off the hook. And Gabriel Benítez is a solid enough grappler, but I think if the fight gets down there, that Jim Miller's going to do what he does best and find a submission pretty quickly. So I like the accuracy, I like the combinations, I like the matchup, and I think the legend continues to grow. Give me Jim Miller by knockout. Now, if you want all of the official bets for the week, as well as the DFS strategy guide, the projections model, the optimizer, access to the community, all of that good stuff, you can go to kunithmma.com. Full transparency, I took the month of December, I think it was the entire month of December off. I had some other things I needed to do. Those distractions are gone. But I didn't update the site in that time. So for those of you that were on the site or pay for the site and didn't have access to the content because there was no content, sincere apologies. But I will be updating this every week moving forward, because I have streamlined some things and made it a bit easier. And there have been some changes to the plans that are offered on the site, just to make sure everything is being delivered on properly and to make things a little bit easier for you. Some of you have seen this page, some of you have not seen this page. It has been updated again. So the price for everything used to be a little bit higher. We changed that. We reduced it for 2024. So if you want total access, that's the price. And then if you want just the lineup optimizer, so that's for all of you DFS heads out there. If you want just the lineup optimizer, it also gives you captain mode as well as classic mode, complete autonomy there. You can change the rules, you can generate as many lineups as you want. It's really a good tool. You have the optimizer and everything else with the total access, but if you wanted just the optimizer, just to give yourself a competitive edge, because most of the field nowadays that you're playing against in DFS probably has one of these. That's DFS stuff. We'll talk more about that in the final picks video, but those are the changes to the site. Go check it out, grab yourself a membership, let's go. This fight right here pisses me off. It pisses me off because of Phil Hawes. Phil Hawes, and I shouldn't even say that I'm pissed off at Phil Hawes. I'm just disappointed. Phil Hawes is the Josh Gordon of MMA. For those of you that don't know, Josh Gordon was one of the best wide receivers at his peak, competing against guys like Calvin Johnson, but he couldn't lay off the weed.
Stay off the weed.
But you look at Phil Hawes, it's all of the same stuff. He is Josh Gordon, uber talented, all the physical tools that you could ask for, some of the best training environments a professional fighter can have. But it's not weed, it's not the drugs. What drugs were to Josh Gordon are what knockout losses are to Phil Hawes. He's an addict and he can't stop and he needs help. His chin has been cracked too many times, and the tough part about it is the strikes that he's eating are not light strikes. Some guys are chinny because everything that lands seems to hurt them. Take somebody like JP Bays, for example. He's getting dropped with jabs, and you can look at that guy and say he's chinny. Take somebody like James Vick. James Vick was getting rocked all the time when he was in the UFC. You could say that guy is chinny. So if you are knocked down or knocked out by somebody who doesn't typically do that, then yeah, you have some durability issues. But let me go through the 4 knockout losses that Phil Hawes has for you. A head kick knockout by Julian Marquez, who's a big boy, 100% finish rate. Go back and watch that fight. He was eating a ton of strikes, like clean punches. He got kneed clean into mouth and still didn't get knocked out. But then he gets kicked with a head kick that was as flush as it could be, knocks him out cold, cracks him on his jaw, scary noise. Knocked out again by the action man Chris Curtis. You don't brawl with Chris Curtis. All right, he's got sneaky power. He throws clean hands. He caught Phil Hawes. And then you look at the fight with Roman Dolidze. Roman Dolidze is fighting for a submission. Phil Hawes escapes. In doing so, messes up his knees, doing the stanky leg as he's trying to walk away. He's limping away, basically. He gets rocked. He's up against the fence, and he gets caught with the 2 cleanest hooks you will see in MMA from very short range. Very tight, powerful hooks that will knock out anybody in the world. And Roman Dolidze is a big dude, tons of power. And recently, he's knocked out by Ikram Aliskerov, where he was winning. And most recently, he's knocked out by Ikram Aliskerov, where he was out for minutes. But he was winning that fight against Aliskerov. He was fighting well. He was moving well. He was moving his head well. He was landing a lot of strikes. Then one shot turned. Now he fights a powerhouse brawler in Brunno Ferreira, who is going to throw everything with 100% power. And it's hard for me to pick against the Brazilian here because Hawes is damaged good. But at the same time, I really don't believe Brunno Ferreira is all that talented. You go back and watch some of the regional film. Sloppy. He's shooting takedowns from the other side of the earth. And in his UFC debut against Greg Rodriguez, he's getting pieced up, taken down at will. RoboCop is making it look easy. But you see that lapse in judgment from RoboCop. You see him admiring his work a little bit. And Brunno Ferreira, he catches him. Boom. Right away. Right then and there, one hook changes the entire fight. And that's what the guy can do. Now you look at his last fight, however, and that sloppiness does cost him the fight. And what do I mean by that? You go back and watch the fight. He throws a naked leg kick. That's mistake number 1. You slow it down, it is extremely telegraphed. The guy in front of him is just watching this slowly come to his leg, catches the leg kick, hits him with a right hand, drops him right then and there. He was probably knocked out already. And if not knocked out, he was at the point where he wasn't going to continue. The follow-up shots leave him stiffer than socks under your bed when you were in high school. Now, so you got a guy in Brunno Ferreira who's coming off of a bad knockout loss. Phil Hawes, who's coming off of a bad knockout loss. They're both blonde. They're probably not naturally blonde. What's happening? But if you look at things from a talent perspective, I know without a shadow of a doubt that the more talented fighter is Phil Hawes. The choice, however, boils down to, do you pick the talent of Phil Hawes or do you pick against the chin of Phil Hawes? Do you pick for him or do you pick on him? Watching these guys side by side, you probably would not say that Brunno Ferreira is the better fighter, and if you do, you probably don't know what you're looking at. But picking him against Phil Hawes at this point makes a lot of sense. All it takes is one. Phil Hawes is going to be there to get hit. My problem, however, is that when Phil Hawes is at his best, or even half of his best, as long as he's minding his P's and Q's, he could make it look easy as well. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 3 or 4 times. I don't know where the shame gets put, but Phil Hawes has one more chance to make me look like a fool here. He needs to play it safe. He needs to make sure that he doesn't slip up, and that's hard to get behind, but I'm going to go with the talent over the chin issue. So give me Phil Hawes to win this fight, I believe, by knockout. And if you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm. You know how the algorithm works. I am happy to be back, not going nowhere. I'm worried about Andrei Arlovski because he's a huge underdog against Waldo Cortes-Acosta, and I can't see the value there. This one's pretty straightforward. We don't need to spend too much time on it. Waldo Cortes-Acosta does a lot of the same things that Andrei Arlovski for the last couple of years has done in his career. He likes to stick and move. He likes to fight at range. He likes to fight behind a jab, throw in an overhand every now and again. You're not going to see a whole lot of leg kicks here. My issue with Andrei Arlovski, because this is the kind of guy that Andrei Arlovski pieced up a couple of years ago. Just puts on a veteran performance, just barely outstrikes him, wins the rounds, wins the the minutes, moves well, frustrates the guy. He just wins the fight. He finds ways to win the fight. But he is slowing down, of course. He's 44. That is to be expected. I know that people can go a bit longer when it comes to heavyweights, but at 44 years old, he's definitely on the decline, and I think Waldo Cortes-Acosta is improving right before our eyes. I think the future is bright for Waldo Cortes-Acosta. Is he going to win a title? I don't know. I don't care. I care about this on a week-to-week basis, and I'll tell you that Waldo Cortes-Acosta, he's going to be throwing some heat, and Andrei Arlovski is going to have to answer back if he wants any chance of winning. He's going to try to answer back if he wants to get any respect in this fight. And I think when he's answering back, Waldo Cortes-Acosta is going to uncork a big one. So give me Salsa Boy, give me Waldo Cortes-Acosta to win this fight this week. I believe that he knocks Andrei Arlovski out. Matt Semelsberger steps in on short notice to replace Basil Hawes to fight Preston Parsons this week. I was actually breaking this down independently, and I liked Hawes in this fight, so it sucks that he's off, but still a fun one on paper. Preston Parsons has a lot to fight for here. With the initials PP, he always has something to prove, but he's coming off of a split decision loss to Trevin Giles, which is not a good look. And fun fact, Trevin Giles has never had a decision not go his way. But Parsons did have success in that fight. He let it slip through his fingers, though. It wasn't an egregious robbery or anything like that. He also fought Daniel Rodriguez as his first fight in the UFC. It was a few years ago at this point. He was knocked out in the first round. In that fight, he showed really poor striking defense, and I don't know if his striking defense is all that improved at this point either, based on what we've seen recently. His lone UFC win was over Evan Elder, who was a debuting lightweight, stepping in on short notice up a weight class. Now, he was able to get takedowns, control Elder. Elder faded as the fight went on, unsurprisingly, given the circumstances. Now he fights Matheus Semelsberger, which is going to be tough, and there are a couple of red flags from the Semelsberger side. We've seen Matheus Semelsberger lose positions in fights and straight up lose fights because of his grappling. He's a solid enough grappler, and he showed flashes, but at the same time, his grappling awareness is super low. You look at his fight with Jeremiah Wells. Jeremiah Wells took him down at will, despite Matt Semelsberger hurting him with nearly every strike he landed. And we saw in the fight with Jeremiah Wells, he's got his feet locked. He's sitting in closed guard for minutes on end, straight up losing the fight as a result. All he had to do was just work back up to his feet, or try to work back up to his feet, and I think that he would have gotten these rounds, but instead he stayed flat on his back, closed guard, minutes go by, rounds go by, he loses the fight. We saw him fight AJ Fletcher, who I believe was stepping in on short notice, making his debut. He gets taken down 4 times and gives up bad positions at bad points in the fight. Probably should have lost that decision. And even last time out, Uros Medic, who was a striker, took him down. Now Preston Parsons, if he can get his wrestling going and apply the pressure that he's known for, not only is he going to win this fight, but I think he finds a submission late in the 2nd or 3rd round. But like so many of these one-dimensional guys, if he gets stuck on the feet with a big, powerful guy like Matheus Semelsberger, he is getting knocked out. And Parsons is a willing striker, but he leaves a lot of openings, and I noticed that he doesn't move his head a whole lot, so most of what he's doing is coming right on a straight line. I could see Semelsberger intercepting him, countering him at different points in the fight, which could lead to a really quick night. I think if they're on the mat for several minutes, Semelsberger can survive. I think if they're on the feet for several minutes, Preston Parsons will not. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Semi the Jedi. I'm taking Matheus Semelsberger here with that reach advantage, a low stance, throwing hard down the middle. I think he wins this fight by knockout. Next, we're looking at Marcus McGhee versus Gaston Bolaños, and the line is justifiably wide because Marcus McGhee is a certified junkyard dog. He's on a 4-fight winning streak, all finishes, fighting out of a very hot gym. He's looked physically dominant in his first 2 UFC fights. Granted, he was fighting guys who are not exactly world beaters, guys that I don't think fight in the UFC anymore, but the fights were so one-sided that the wins are still impressive. Now, Bolaños is a banger as well. He's got serious power. He's not afraid to let his hands go. His UFC debut was a win over Aaron Phillips, where he won. Now, Bolaños is a banger as well. He has power. He's not afraid to let his hands go. His UFC debut was a win over Aaron Phillips, and that was the first time that he won a fight by decision. But you gotta like all the kickboxing experience. He's only 31 years old, so still a lot of time left in this game, and a lot of good experience in MMA as well under his belt. I think he's somebody who can win some fights in the UFC, definitely push some guys in the UFC, give them hard, entertaining fights for sure. But you have to go back to Marcus McGhee here. You have to feed the hot hand. It's hard to go against him with these odds, odds with this matchup and how good he's looked recently, and he's in a gym with a new champion. A rising tide lifts all boats. He's in a championship environment, a hot gym. He's got a teammate fighting on this card. A lot of things to like about the training environment from Marcus McGhee. So I see him winning this fight. I would not be shocked if we see him do it with his grappling. However, most of his wins are by knockout, but he does have that grappling in his back pocket. That's where Bolaños with that kickboxing base is weakest. I don't know what the odds are for a sub prop for Marcus McGhee, but it's definitely worth it if it's going to be at plus money. He seems like the type of guy who's going to come in here and fight a smart game plan. So give me the Maniac. Give me Marcus McGhee to win this fight by submission. Next, we have a fight with Farid Basharat. He's fighting Taylor Lapilus this week, and like Marcus McGhee, we gotta feed the hot hand. Betting against the Basharat brothers have quite literally lost people money every single time. They're both undefeated, and I don't see Farid dropping that this week. The dude's extremely well-rounded. He fights clean. He's got high fight IQ, and you gotta be impressed with his win over Demont Blackshear. His grappling was on point in both of those fights, and expect him to lean on it this week because Taylor Lapilus is a striker who forces guys to fight at his pace. He moves really well, and you could tell he's keeping a count out there. He's clearly committed to playing the numbers game in these fights. Land a few strikes, move. Land a few strikes, move. And he's always trying to make sure that he's landing more than his opponent. He wants to be on the right side of the volume, even if that means he's not taking a whole lot of chances. Now, Basharat's not going to give him an opportunity to fight like that this week. I feel like Farid's easiest path to not getting a win here is by trying to fight this guy at range and playing that kickboxing game with him, because that's what Lapilus wants to do. And you might look at his record and see the submissions and think, well, he can grapple as well. He's a grappler. He can grapple, but those wins are against low-level guys. You see in his recent fights in the bigger promotions, he's not submitting anybody. I expect Basharat to come out here, strike for a little bit in the first round, and we'll find out right then and there if it's a good path to victory for him. My guess is it's not. My guess is that the striking is going to be competitive, and the Basharats are not going to be fighting in a way that the other person's all that comfortable. So if it's competitive on the feet, after round one is when I think we see Farid Basharat start to mix in the grappling a bit more. That's where he's going to win minutes, win rounds, win the fight. The over in this fight is attractive if you want to try to get there. I think the best prop in this fight is Farid Basharat by decision, and that's the pick for this fight. Farid Basharat wins this fight on the judges' scorecards. Next, we're looking at Gene Silva. He's fighting Westin Wilson, who looks like he accidentally walked into a karate gym one day and was too polite to tell the staff that he was in the wrong place, thus pursuing a career in combat sports. And now at 34 years old, he's thrusted into the UFC fighting Murderer. Now he fights Gene Silva, who is coming off of a win on Contender Series, big power. He's going to be a lot stronger in there. He's a lot younger, man. He's minus 800 favorite. We don't got to do too much here. Round one knockout prop for Gene Silva is going to give you even better odds, the little fight parlay that you can make on most books, but give me Gene Silva to win this fight this week by knockout. And I mean, look at him. He looks terrifying. Look at this guy. Look at what kind of tan is that? Whatever tan that is, Tom Nolan has the opposite of it. Another mismatch, however, on this card. Young, massive Australian and Tom Nolan making his debut against Nicolas Mata. Nolan is undefeated, 4-fight knockout streak. We saw him dust Bogdan Grad on the Contender Series in the first round, and I think he does the same thing this week against Nicolas Mata. He's effectively 1-3 in the promotion. We saw that premature stoppage by Mike Beltran, classic Mike Beltran. His lone win in the UFC is over Cameron Van Camp, who has no business being there based on what we've seen so far. Mata is a striker. He's not all that defensively sound. We've seen him chin-checked multiple times in his short UFC tenure. He's given up a whole lot of height and reach in this fight against the young, powerful striker. I don't see it ending well for him. And I remember not too long ago, Nicolas Mata floating the idea that he might retire, and you can't have 1 foot in, 1 foot out of the fight game. It's just not going to work. The line here couldn't be wide enough. You can argue that it's a step up in competition, yes, for Tom Nolan, but I see him rising to the occasion, looking good in his UFC debut. I think Tom Nolan wins this fight by knockout. And then we wrap it up with Felipe Bunez making his UFC debut this week against young up-and-coming Joshua Van. He was supposed to fight Deniz Bondar on this fight. Bondar pulls out, Joshua Van steps in, things get a lot harder for Bunez. Bondar was going to try to come in here, wrestle. We've learned that he's not all that great after 2 strange outcomes in the UFC. That, to me, was a very winnable fight for Bunez in his debut. Now he has Joshua Van, however, who's a completely different animal. The guy fights like a veteran and has all of those advantages of being a younger man. All the stuff that you would have naturally, like great speed, awesome durability, solid gas tank, tons of confidence. Felipe Bunez is 34 years old. He's seen it all. He's done it all in the sport, and he has a lot of pressure on him this week making his debut. And the fighting aside, I couldn't imagine the pressure. The reason why these guys choose to do this as a career is because this is what they learned how to do when they were young. They got into it. They started making a little bit of money doing it. Now this is their job. They do this in the pursuit of money largely. So a lot of these guys do everything they can to try to make it to the UFC. Let me fight at the biggest and best organization so I can make as much money as possible fighting because it's the biggest stage. But at 34 years old, he has so much riding on this. His window's still open, but it's not all that wide. Joshua Van's window is 3 times the size as his. And he probably has so much riding on this because he's only fighting for 10 and 10 or 12 and 12, however they do it. Again, I couldn't imagine the pressure. Now, on the other side, Joshua Van is nearly a boy who is great at fighting, staring down a 3-0 record in the UFC inside of a year. The sky is the limit. The pressure is gone. He's only accepting this fight because he knows he can win. Very easy call for us. Very easy call for you. Very easy call for Joshua Van and his team. He touches this guy up, cruises to a decision win. Give me Joshua Van this week by decision. If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Excited for what the new year brings. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Be on the lookout for the DFS video later in the week, and I will see you then.